Welcome to the Shootin' Show. Stand by for shots fired.
Hello, I'm Johnny Rowland, your host of the Shootin' Show, and welcome to today's program. We really have an entertaining show for you today. We've seen so many great features recently that we're anxious to get on the screen so you can see. The judge will have some great commentary a little later on in the program, and I tell you what, friends, the key is to reach as many people with our message. You know, right now, the organized news media, so many of the people in Washington on the liberal left are trying so desperately to make us as all gun owners into nuts and extremists and people that are very undesirable in this culture. Well, they're exactly wrong. They're 100% wrong, and we have to reach the rest of America with our side of the story. Friends, our work has only just begun. We've got a long way to go. So anyway, let's get another shooting show underway. Let's take this Marlin Camp carbine in 45 ACP, and let's start another shooting show. Friends, I tell you what, with great carbine ammunition in this 45 ACP carbine, tell you what, that's about as good as it gets. Now, friends, I'm holding a very useful and neat little gun here. This is made by the Marlin Firearms Company, and it's called the Camp Carbine. It's in 45 automatic. And this is one of those guns that we don't see that often. In fact, I think that there's a lot more use for a little gun out there than a lot of us think. One of the beauty parts that Marlin has done with this series of guns, it's a very traditional looking firearm, except for this piece right here that looks like a pistol grip, but in fact this is a magazine well. You know, the 9mm carbine they make takes a standard Smith & Wesson magazine, and I really think this was a good idea. This standard Camp carbine here in 45 ACP takes a regular Colt government model magazine. So there's always going to be plenty of magazines out there available for these guns. It'll hold 7, and of course that easily gets it in under the ridiculous so-called assault gun ban limit, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't make any sense at all, but anyway, you still have a very handy carbine. Now, you know, everyone is not comfortable with a handgun. The 45 ACP, I think, is very easy to shoot in a handgun, but not everyone feels that way. And some people are just uncomfortable with a handgun. Well, this gives an excellent alternative. Now, this could be a hunting gun easily with the great carbine ammunition in the 230 or 200 or even the 185 grain ammunition. It really could be up to and including a deer gun, say out to about 50 yards or so. And one, you just don't have the velocities with the 45 ACP that you do with some other cartridges. And two, you don't gain as much velocity in this barrel, and I'm going to guess this is a little over 16 inches as far as barrel length goes. You don't get the advantage that you would, say, in some other carbines, say the 357 Magnum or a 44 Magnum. You don't get that increase because the 45 ACP is a very, very efficient cartridge just the way it comes from the factory. Now then, with the high performance loads, you will pick up some. We noticed with hardball, we picked up about 100 feet per second in an overall velocity in the length. But I tell you what, when you get in the high performance ammunition such as this great carbine, we shot the water jugs at the beginning of our program with the 200 grain carbine, and they run over 1,100 feet per second out of this gun, which between 11 and 1,200, which would give you between 500 and 600 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Now then, 185 grain carbine runs over 1,300 out of this gun, and you're looking at over 700 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So what you're doing there, you're getting up in some serious power. Another thing, friends, of course, this would be a great companion gun for your standard government model like this Colt, because they do take the same magazine. And what it does, we have experienced accuracy. We bench rested this little gun yesterday, and we do appreciate our good friend Bradley Britton loaning us this from the good folks there at Britton's in Shreveport. Anyway, we found that it gets pretty good accuracy, pretty good handgun accuracy, and honestly, it has a heavy trigger, and possibly that can be worked on. These are pure blowbacks in action. It doesn't have locking lugs. It is a stiff spring here that works on the blowback principle. And we'll be sure to go ahead and load it in your safety. Here's in the front of the trigger guard, and we'll look at that just a little bit closer in a moment. But what we've seen so far is it will do under 2 inches at 25 yards. Now then, for the caliber and the type gun it is, that's probably acceptable. And honestly, for home defense, it really, I think, would come into its own. Remember, this gun does not apply to the ridiculous Brady bill, or the Brady bill doesn't apply to this gun, whereas you couldn't go down and buy this Colt, but if you wanted a 45 and you needed a gun in a hurry, and you found one of these camp carbines, well, that's an excellent alternative. Now then, to investigate something, if you had a home defense situation, you can easily put the butt of this gun under your arm like so, have your flashlight over here, and it's pretty easy. No, it's not as easy as a handgun, but it's pretty easy to have in a relatively safe position as far as having the gun taken away from you. You don't have to have that barrel sticking out so far. You could definitely make a search if you had to. And for a lady who, again, wasn't comfortable with handguns, it's very easy to hit quickly with. You have a blaze orange front sight. It's easy to pick up in low light conditions. Now, it has a little recoil. You'd be surprised. You know, when you're shooting a handgun, your bent elbows or your forearms here actually perform somewhat as shock absorbers. And on the rifle, well, all of the recoil goes into your shoulder, but it's just not that bad. Let's take a look at it off in my hands today anyway. See, it's not so much, you do feel it now. You do feel it. But it's not such, it's just a little slap. You know, it's not terribly bad. I don't think you saw that muzzle moving hardly at all. I just don't think so. So the point is, you can shoot this gun rapidly and accurately. And for a lot of us, they're going to be able to shoot it faster and more accurately, say, than they would a handgun. Now then, if you're well practiced with a handgun, well, that's great. But this is going to be easier to hit with for most people, especially those people that don't shoot very much. Our reliability factor has just been excellent. Now again, since these guns are pure blowback, I wouldn't want to shoot a lot of the high performance, the plus P type loadings for practice. I sure would want to go out and be sure that my magazines worked, be sure that the gun functioned well, but I think that I'd reserve my target practice for the regular military type issue hardball. And then for home defense, or certainly for hunting, then I would go to the higher powered ammunition. Now, we had talked to Marlin when we had one of their 9mm carbines on the show a while back, and they said due to the way the action works, and it's a strong spring here, you have a buffer type thing here in the back that the action bumps against, in order to help the gun with longevity, with certainly length of time between repairs. I think that's what I would do. I would certainly learn to shoot the gun with the standard velocity things, but for home defense, I tell you what, friends, you have 600 or 700 foot-pounds of energy with this great carbine ammunition. One, the hollow point is going to open up. I especially like the 200 grain load because you have that big flying ashtray bullet there in that particular carbine load, and I just think it would be a terrific home defense gun. It's not going to be as dangerous as far as shooting through buildings or maybe into someone else's house, because the first thing it hits is going to start opening up, and of course the bullet will begin to stop. But this is really a neat concept. I think that Marlin is to be commended for making this little gun. In fact, let's take a closer look at it so you can see a little better how it works. Now, friends, taking a closer look, you can see it is a very compact sized gun. The top of the receiver here is drilled for a scope mount if you'd so desire. Here is, of course, the bolt handle. It's a straight blowback with a good strong spring. This is some sort of polymer, the magazine well here, but it looks to be very strong and well thought out. This is the magazine release. This is the bolt hold open button. You just push it up there and it holds the bolt open for cleaning or for inspection. You can see it has the typical Marlin type sights, but this front sight, believe me, you can pick that up in a hurry. Very compact size and nicely made. Here's your safety right here in front of the trigger. That's in the on position to push the safety off. Just push it forward, it's ready to fire. Friends, of course, to load the gun, just push the magazine in place here until it's flush. Now, the magazines don't fall out, but you have a little place here that you can grasp the front of the magazine and pull it out. It's easily done. And of course, we'll go ahead and load the gun. Like I said, an excellent concept, well thought out. Typically, the Marlins have been very reliable and well-made guns. So So it is one of those guns that is certainly a lot of fun to shoot.
You know, friends, a lot of our firearms culture today was begun in movies that a lot of us watched as small children. We went to Dewey, Oklahoma a few days ago, and we're going to take a look inside the Tom Mix Museum.
Well, friends, we have discovered one of the neatest things that we've run across in some time. We're here in Dewey, Oklahoma at the Tom Mix Museum, and some of you will know who Tom Mix was. Of course, he was, during the 1920s, probably the #1 cowboy actor. He was a star of major proportions, not only here in the United States, but also in Europe and many other countries. These folks have a very again, this is one of the neatest things we've just come across. Now, Dewey, Oklahoma is just a very short distance, a couple of miles north of Bartlesville. And Bartlesville is, I'm going to guess, about 40 or so miles north of Tulsa. So the Dewey is right here on Highway 75, and the Tom Mix Museum is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Highway 75. And yes, I am giving details because if you're planning a vacation, the Oklahoma state region is one of the more historically concentrated areas. There's so many things. If you like firearms, if you like Western history, you know, Oklahoma was one of the last states. I believe it was the 46th state that joined the Union. So realize that after 1900, this was still Indian territory. So trust me, it's a great place to come and visit, and we're going to have several features from this area in the near future. Today we're at the Tom Mix Museum, and Tom, unlike so many of the characters in Hollywood today, Tom was for real. He was a real cowboy. He was actually a sheriff. We had a little information here earlier. He was the town marshal here in Dewey at one time. Susan, am I correct on that? We have our curator standing by. If I make a major error, she'll correct me. But he was a real lawman. And I'm standing here by, and let's see if we can get a shot of, this is a replica, or sort of a replica, it's a little bigger actually, of Tony, one of Tom Mix's horses. And you can see the silver-studded bridle and the saddle, and of course it's all for real. This, of course, horse, in fact, the horse was darn near as famous as Tom Mix back during his heyday. And realize that Tom Mix was made over 300 films. Most of them were silent films. He was not a big fan of the talking picture. We learned this today. He didn't particularly like the way his voice sounded, although he sounds for real. He was a real cowboy. The stunts that Tom Mix did, he actually performed, and we've come to find out that he was really nursing a lot of injuries. Now, he was born in 1880, he lived until 1940, and he was killed in a car wreck. I think there was some construction or something on the road, and he was a multi-millionaire at the time, and he had a very fancy, the equivalent of a Ferrari today. He had a Cord, and he was killed in that car wreck. But we're going to walk through and look at a few things here in the museum. And friends, trust me, the man was certainly a firearms enthusiast. He was apparently a very fine and competent rifle and handgun shooter. He was in Wild West shows, and this is one of those characters, whereas the actual Tom Mix character was a lot more colorful and interesting probably than his movie character. He was always the nice guy in the movies, you know, one of the original White Hat boys, but in actuality he was a remarkable character, very, very colorful.
Stay tuned for more of the Shootin' Show after these important messages.
You know, friends, this box of Corbin ammunition and this Wesson 41 Magnum are in fact a perfect match for each other. But it doesn't matter whatever gun you may have, like this SKS or a hunting rifle or a 38 Special or a 9mm, makes no difference, because Corbin is absolutely the best factory ammunition that money can buy, period. And also, friends, when you see a box of Corbin on the shelf or you give them a call, realize that Corbin is helping keep the Shootin' Show on the air. They've been one of our most dedicated sponsors. You cannot find finer people in the entire shooting industry. For information on Corbin ammunition, call them 1-800 1-800-626-7266. Again, 1-800-626-7266. Tell them you saw it on The Shootin' Show.
The Shootin' Show will be right back after this break for your local cable company or TV station. Friends, all of us as shooting enthusiasts should be subscribing to Shotgun News, the trading post for anything that shoots. 3 big issues monthly with literally thousands and thousands of firearms bargains. Shotgun News, Post Office Box 669, Hastings, Nebraska, the zip code 68902, their phone number, area 402-463-4589, MasterCard or Visa for subscriptions only. Now call them at 1-800-345-6923.
Now, friends, a lot of people don't know this, but Tom was actually in the U.S. military. He fought in the Spanish-American War, and there's quite a story around that because he was in the military more than once, I believe. In fact, he went on a furlough from the U.S. military, and he never went back. I mean, and he was never court-martialed. He was never charged or tried about any of that, but let's just say I think there was some humor about this, that he was on an extended furlough. I don't think you could try that today. But this is a sawed-off shotgun that we assume belonged to him and probably was useful here in his job as a local lawman in this area. So right across the street, get unchoked here, across the street is the old bank building from the museum here, and then you can see in the picture, and then catty-cornered from the bank is the old hotel, and I think you'll find that really interesting. And you notice in that little tower on the end of the hotel, they kept a rifleman in that little tower. So the bank, they never had any problems with being robbed. They never had any difficulties because somebody in that tower sat with a rifle and watched the front of that bank. So they really didn't have trouble here. I'll tell you what, that could be something that'd be useful today, couldn't it?
Now, friends, what you're looking at here is Tom Mix's medicine chest, essentially, and you notice it's a large box. It's full of ointments and treatments because, remember, he did all his own stunts and he was beaten up pretty bad. And he carried this around with him everywhere he went. Now, you also see gloves and all sorts of range-type clothing that he wore in the movies. Now, you know, Tom Mix had quite a collection of guns, and some of his are on the display here in the museum. What you see here, let's look at an original Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum with Tom's name there on the grips. Now, besides that, Smith & Wesson, he was also a big fan of Colt official police revolvers. And, of course, he had a large collection of sporting rifles, Winchester and Marlin lever action. So all this is on display.
Well, friends, as we were talking earlier, you know, Tom Mix did all his own stunts, and this is a fantastic picture here. This is for real. He and one of his horses named Tony, I think there were actually 3 different Tonys. This is the Wonder Horse, I believe. He's actually jumping a 25-foot gorge in California. Now, friends, that is unreal. There are a lot of old pictures here that show Tom doing things. He played polo. We have throwing knives, throwing axes, all sorts of different things. Really quite a colorful character. Now, friends, there are a number of different exhibits here. One, I do find these saddles very interesting because they have a McClellan-type split down the center of the saddle, so it would enable the horse to get more air. It was a comfort more to the horse than it was to the rider, probably. But these are some metal suitcases. In fact, one of these suitcases is actually what caused the death of Tom Mix. He ran off the road. He was probably going rather fast. He had says here, He died in a car crash as he raced his 1937 Cord 812 supercharged Phaeton along Highway 89. He lost control at a construction detour and slammed into a dry wash. Tom died when one of his metal suitcases here stacked on the back seat shot forward and broke his neck. So what we're going to do now, we're going to need to put Brady Bill the suitcases. You know, it just goes to show that in accidents anything can happen, I suppose. We have the old bat wing chaps, and I'm not a big enough or good enough authority on shaps or chaps to, I'm going to assume that's what they are. I guess I should ask somebody, but it is so interesting to see all these real things used in movies. Now, friends, you can see this Tom Mix Western Theater, and that's one of the neat things you can do. You can come in and they will show you, for those of you, and certainly a lot of younger people who are watching the program, will not have a true understanding of what Tom Mix did, or just in fact how big a star he was. Well, they do have movies that they will show you, and you've got a real nice theater here. In fact, that's one of the really fun things that we got to do earlier. We watched a Tom Mix movie I'd certainly never seen. And it is very entertaining, and it will give you some really appreciation for what they did. Tom Mix, of course, did all his own stunts, and here's the kicker. They used live ammunition. Now, no, I don't know, and I don't know how many accidents they had. Remember, this was in the very beginning of the movie business, and I don't know why, but they used a lot of these stunt shots that we see him do. Apparently he actually did, because we saw a scene earlier where he took his gun out and he shot on the ground and dust flew, and it was impressive, but something we would never, of course they could never do today, but it is interesting to see just where these folks came from and what they did. So again, here we are in Dewey, Oklahoma. It's right not too far from Coffeyville, Kansas, and that's another trip because that's where the Dalton brothers raid was, and they have a real fine museum there in Coffeyville, and there are so many other things. There's a museum in Claremore. There are some really great enthusiasts. There are some very fine reenactments in this area. We're sort of discovering, you know, that's what we do, is go around and discover some of these historical areas that are really entertaining today, because, friends, let me tell you what, if we don't pass along this history of how our people came out here and how they got what they did, and how firearms were such a very important part of people's lives, and it enabled people to survive and to have peaceful homes, I tell you what, if we don't pass it on, well, no one's going to. So we think places like this are very important, and let me tell you what, the people here are very nice, very cooperative. There are really quite a number of things for people to see. Certainly, there's a 20-foot anaconda skin that Tom Mix had. Your guess good as mine why he would have a 20-foot anaconda skin. But there are a lot of things that certainly anyone interested in history and the old movies and the old Western fans would really enjoy seeing. We really highly recommend coming down through here.
More and more often, women are faced with protecting themselves and their homes. But another way of protection is through information. And we at the Shootin' Show believe that the New American Magazine has the best information that you can possibly get.
You can get the New American by calling 1-800-727-TRUE, and those numbers, of course, are 1-800-727-8783. The New American, $22 for a 6-month subscription. It comes twice a month. Friends, you need this magazine if you want to know what's going on, and in times like this, we need both of these. We need our guns, and we darn sure need our information.
fill up the Uniclip with your ammo, and each Uniclip holds 30 rounds and can be used over and over. You get 3 Uniclips with your rapid loader. You can load a 30-round magazine in about 3 seconds. The price of the C3 rapid loader is only $39.95 plus $4 shipping and handling, Visa or MasterCard accepted. To see if the C3 system will fit your gun, call Bobby or Al at 1-800-SAVE-YOU-GUN. That's our 800 number, 1-800-728-8486. Well, friends, we hope you're enjoying our program. Judge, you have quite a bit of information for us this week, don't you?
Well, I've got information. I don't know how much it is. It's more than I can have time to talk about. I know that.
Well, I understand that this former Brigadier General Benton K. Parton has some information. Incidentally, we have just come back from a trip into Oklahoma, and I do want to compliment. I've been through Oklahoma on several occasions, but I've never been to what they call green country up around Tulsa. And Judge, I'll tell you, that's some of the prettiest country in the U.S. of A. People are so nice. A lot of history in that area. A lot of people of Indian descent. Very interesting.
That's Cherokee country, isn't it?
Well, Cherokee, Osage, Delaware. There's a whole, so many of the Indians were put there from the East Coast. And that's another story. I was told while I was there that the reason the Cherokees look different, say, than Indians in the western United States was because, and for that matter, the eastern seaboard Indians, they had enough Vikings that showed up over the centuries, pre-Columbus, of course, that married, made friends with the Indians there, and of course they'd drop the Vikings off and they'd do something all year, and then the boat might not get back, they'd be lost or whatever else. And anyway, the tribes of Indians, enough influence, European influence there, that the Indians actually look different. So I found that interesting. That's what I was told now.
Vikings always had big mustaches like you have.
Well, excuse me. But the Indians pulled their facial hair out. They didn't go for facial hair.
Well, I knew they didn't have any facial hair, I didn't think.
Well, if they had some, I think they kind of pulled it. I stand to be corrected. We have some folks that know more about that than I do, which wouldn't be too hard. Please let us know. But anyway, sir, what's on your leaderboard there?
Well, I've got a lot of stuff here, Johnny. This is a letter from Benton Partin, P-A-R-T-I-N, Partin, from Alexandria, Virginia. He's a retired brigadier general in the Air Force and is supposed to be an explosives and demolition expert. He has taken it on himself, and he's got a curriculum here that's quite long, many honors, 3 Legions of Merit, Distinguished Service Medal, but the meat of his letter is that he is grieved by the tragedy in Oklahoma City, and he says we may never know who the real instigators were or why they did it, as in the Kennedy assassination. And I don't think anybody knows today for sure that Oswald was or was not the real culprit in that thing, or whether he was just a patsy. The general is concerned that vital evidence will be forever destroyed when they demolish that building. Apparently it's going to go down with demolition charges tomorrow.
We're editing this on Monday, that's what I understand. Tomorrow it's coming down.
Well, that's the last thing I saw. He says, with a, quote, high level of confidence, that the damage pattern on the reinforced concrete superstructure could not possibly have been attained from a single truck bomb without supplementing demolition charges at the base of some of the reinforced concrete pilasters or column bases. He says it's totally incompatible, that it lies in the fact that either some of the columns were collapsed that should not have collapsed, or some of the columns are still standing that should have collapsed and didn't. And he goes through a 5-page analysis of it, including a diagram of the damage and so forth. And as far as I'm concerned, I think he's established what in the legal profession we call a prima facie case, that truck bomb was not the whole story.
The Shootin' Show will be right back after this break for your local cable company or TV station.
Well, I've heard several people say they feel like that just an ammonium nitrate bomb on its own could have done that. And of course, I'm no demolition expert myself, but you know, this is another one of those situations that is developing to be stranger and stranger as the more we find out about it.
Well, he is a demolition expert. He is an explosives expert. And he puts it this way: the gross asymmetry, lack of symmetry, in the federal building damage pattern is ipso facto evidence that there was most probably a demolition charge effect and a truck bomb effect. He's saying that, of course, they didn't have to know each other, but it would have been certainly a strange coincidence for two efforts to demolish the building to occur at the same moment.
Well, we've heard about seismograph reports that there was more than one explosion. Now, we've heard that. I don't.
He discusses that too. He discusses that. He says that that coordination could have been accomplished from almost any place in the world. There are local patsies distributed or greedy people available to help always.
Well, we understand that a lot of the records from Waco happen to be in that building. Now, these are things that have passed through our office here. I don't know if that's. I don't have the details on that, but that was something that we had happened to hear over this past week or so.
Well, he says that there was a 1-second delay between two events reported by a University of Oklahoma seismologist, and he says that doesn't make sense. That no triangulation was reported to assure the same point of origin, but if there was a second explosion with a 10-second delay, everybody in Oklahoma City would have discerned it. Mm-hmm. That it had to all be done at the same time, and it could have been done by primacord that detonates at a quarter of an inch per microsecond, per millionth of a second. Mm-hmm. And he then proceeds to point out one other item, that because of the psycho-political operation going on at the present time against the Christian right, that the media is trying to make a bogeyman out of, records in Waco, Idaho, California, and other places, and the high-level promotion of censored officials, and he would strongly urge that the U.S. Congress take steps to assure the evidence in Oklahoma City be independently evaluated by a collection of demolition experts from the private sector before they allow that building to be demolished. He says it's easy to determine whether a column was failed by contact demolition charges or by air blast loading, and it's also easy to cover up critical evidence, as was, as he put it, apparently done at Waco.
That's true. After Waco, they moved in and bulldozed it immediately. That's very distressing, and it looks like they're about to do the same thing there in Oklahoma.
Well, he has, of course, in the delay that they took to try to recover bodies and so forth, some of this investigation may actually have been done. This letter has been delivered to a dozen, no more than a dozen, about 20 U.S. senators and probably 30 or 40 U.S. representatives, including Mr. Newt Gingrich. I'll get the name right this time. Newt Gingrich. I don't know. We may yet see that demolition delayed. But this is a retired Brigadier General of the United States Air Force with a distinguished career. And it's amazing to me what he has been able to put together just from photographs that he's seen.
Well, speaking of that, I want to, of course, all this has got this Oklahoma situation with the bombing. There's such an uproar going on now. What's your feeling about the NRA's sort of semi-apology for what Pierre said?
I don't think that was an apology at all. It was what would anybody with any common sense would understand, that the NRA blast was at federal agents who had gone out of control and gone berserk. That it didn't mean that every federal agent was bad or crook. As a matter of fact, as the NRA has explained it, that there have been about a dozen specific instances, half a dozen I think they call it, where BATF agents abuse their authority. And let me tell you, to kill a man's dog, his son, and his wife, who's holding an infant in her arms, all of them unarmed, to kill them without provocation, to shoot them, and that's contrary to all of their standing orders, all of their standard rules of engagement, and then have nobody prosecuted for it. If that's not an example of jackbooted thugs, I don't know what you'd call it. I said last week, I say again, if that's not jackbooted thugs, then tell me what it is.
Well, someone I was talking to last week over this same thing, jackbooted thugs, Nazi-type people, said, well, you can't call them that, call them something else. I said, well, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it swims like a duck, it's probably a duck. And I think we just have to call them what they, in fact, what some of these folks are.
Well, of course, Bush took advantage of the situation and blessed out the NRA because that's the popular thing to do with the media. But the NRA ran a full-page advertisement in a lot of magazines, in a lot of newspapers, the LA Times, the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today. I wish somebody who has a copy of that advertisement would send it to me. I have not seen the advertisement. I would love to have it. But Wayne LaPierre affirmed that the NRA in no way meant to imply that all law enforcement agents were bad. The NRA has had a long history of supporting law enforcement.
That's true.
Supporting law enforcement with their shooting programs, supporting law enforcement with urging legislation to put criminals away, and the 3 strikes and you're out program. There are too many specific instances where NRA has supported law enforcement to ever get this idea that Clinton has that the NRA has ill-gotten gains.
Well, you know, Judge, it looks like that the leftists, the people who really are against us in Washington and some other places too, it looks like they're trying to start more trouble. It looks like they're trying to antagonize the gun-owning American, the right-thinking American. It looks like they're just trying to start something, maybe as an excuse to take away more of our rights, to take away more of our guns, because they know we're not going to give them up willingly. So they have to have people in an uproar and turmoil. Looks like they're trying to antagonize us.
Well, sure they're trying to do it. As General Parton said, the psycho-political operation going on at the present time against the Christian right or conservatives in general, the fact that the Waco incident has gone the way it has, or hasn't gone the way it has, and the Idaho situation at Ruby Ridge, all LaPierre said was that it appears that if you've got a badge, and I think he was talking about specifically from ATF, that you have the government's go ahead to harass, intimidate, and murder law-abiding citizens. I don't think there's any excuse for shooting a woman with a baby in her arms from a range of about 200 yards, where it was obvious with a telescopic sight that she wasn't armed, and to shoot her in the back is absurd.
Shoot on top of the
Absolutely
head.
absurd.
Ridiculous.
Or shooting his son, who was a teenager. As far as that goes, shooting his dog too. That's an act of war by itself. I don't think it was a broadside against federal agents like Bush seemed to think. The Houston Chronicle were generally rather supportive, I thought. I have here some articles from the Houston Chronicle, and they say that Constitution's at the heart of the gun debate. They say this: last month, 26 professors of law and public policy told the House Subcommittee on Crime that the Second Amendment is being trivialized by gun control advocates and others as little more than a protection for target shooters, recreational hunters, or duck shooters. I think that's ridiculous too. I'm reminded of the article that was in the Yale Law Review, a Law Review comment several years ago by an esteemed professor. He said his title was "The Embarrassing Second Amendment." Of course, he was a liberal. He admitted he was a liberal.
Anti-gun.
And he just saw that the arguments that the NRA and that gun owners have are correct arguments. And I can assure you, anybody that has really studied the subject would come to the conclusion that it is a correct argument. Got my regular facts from NRA this weekend. This advertisement, this full-page advertisement, concluded by informing the former president that in the end, congressional examination of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms will show that our words have been more truth than slander. And on 2020, Attorney General Reno, I like to call her the Witch of Waco, because she took full responsibility for it, said that knowing what happened, I wouldn't do it again. We are not going to do it again. Well, that's interesting, because it confesses errors, and somebody's head ought to roll. You can't murder 96 people on nationwide television and incinerate them and then come in and bulldoze the remainder so you can't find out exactly what happened without somebody being liable or culpable on it. It just is unreasonable. It could happen to you, Johnny, out at your country home, just like in Ruby Ridge, Idaho.
Any one of us. That's right. Any one of us. And it turns out that their warrant was no good anyway, from everything we've turned up. It was just like some of these drug operations. They break in the wrong house, and sometimes people are killed, and somebody's got to be in charge of the store.
Incidentally, U.S. News and World Report. I canceled my subscription to them years ago when they refuse to answer me and discuss their attitude about the gun issue. They have now contained, in May 22nd, they have contained an editor's clarification that noted that an attempt will be made to more accurately report firearms-related issues. They'll no longer use the term cop-killer ammunition to describe hollow point rounds. I thought they were using that for armor piercing.
Right, I did too.
But now they're saying hollow point, and they will not use the categoric term assault weapons to describe military-style semi-autos. The editors vowed to describe firearms by their function.
Good for them.
Let's wait and see what they do.
See what happens. You're exactly right.
They may be catching on. Well, Johnny, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I think you summed it up really well. We, like the fact says there, stay tuned, because, friends, we're going to be on top of this thing, and we're going, we can't let it rest. We're going to have to get to the bottom of it, because what we have to do is force people in government to become responsible, or replace them with people who will be responsible.
Well, I think we've got the essence of that, and it was all set to have full-scale congressional hearings on Waco, on Ruby Ridge, and some of the other abuses of the ATF
when this thing happened.
When the Oklahoma happened. And that, of course, shifted the focus over to something else, and then the media immediately picked up and started talking about militias, started talking about various other things that really have absolutely no relevance.
That's right, absolutely. Well, incidentally, I heard one commentator say the other day that there's so much trouble brewing for Clinton, and this guy predicted that if all this stuff comes out on Clinton that is currently waiting and currently boiling, they think that Clinton's going to take a state trip to some other country and not come back. Just stay there.
Well, I don't want him to do that.
Certainly not.
Probably the situation with Kennedy's assassination, Johnson's ascendancy to the presidency, and then about a year and a half later, the Goldwater campaign, and Senator Goldwater himself said that the American people just didn't want 3 presidents in 2 years.
Well, we absolutely need to have Bill Clinton defeated fair, square, royally, and him sent back to whatever part of Arkansas that he can enjoy being. Let him go out there and farm chickens for a while. I don't know what his good friend up there and whatever.
Incidentally, by this time, we'll know, sometime this next week, I guess we'll find out, that Handgun Control Incorporated has gotten a permit to launch a demonstration at the NRA annual meeting in Phoenix this weekend. And they had no less than 15 satellite feeds currently reported at the annual meeting. Heavy media coverage is anticipated, and the NRA members are being asked through this fax and the fax network to monitor your local media to make sure that there's a fair coverage, and be sure to contact your local stations when you feel that the coverage is not being done in a fair manner.
That's good. And that's correct. If you see something on your local station that has not been presented properly, let them know. Let them know.
I tell you how you can really attract the media attention. When they start broadcasting things, particularly on television, that are one-sided and biased, just notice in your newspapers the next time they apply for their license renewal and write a protest into the FCC protesting the renewal of that TV license, and you'll get the attention of the TV stations in one large hurry.
That's true, because they all come up, don't they?
They do come up.
The last one.
Shootin' Show will be right back after this break for your local cable company or TV station.
If you would like to advertise on the Shootin' Show, you can call us at 1-800-SAVE-YOU-GUN. That's 1-800-728-8486. Our staff will be very happy to talk to you.
For more information on the Jerry Michalik shooting classes, please call 318-949-1303. Again, that number is 318-949-1303.
All right, Jerry, I see you have one of your revolvers here handy.
Model 65. It's a 357 38 special K-frame gun. And what I want to demonstrate for you is the technique I use to hold a revolver. And it doesn't look like much, and it's really hard to point out the finer points of holding a revolver correctly. That's one thing I've learned through the years. If you look like you're shooting, but there's so much involved in it. And if you want to if you want to try to repeat a performance, it's extremely hard, because you, believe it or not, you forget how to hold something from day to day. You go out and you practice a while, and you naturally adapt to a gun to make it shoot fast, or fast and accurately. And the next day you go out and you hold it a little bit different, and you have a lot of trouble. And this particular gun right here, to me, is one of the harder ones to shoot. And I'll show you something here. See, when I grab a revolver, I'll grab it up as high as I can possibly get it. and have the hammer still function. What I'm trying to do is get the center line of the bore down to the center line of my hand. Very important to have it recoil straight back.
Right.
And of course, the trigger finger, you notice on the trigger, you can vary the amount of leverage that you have on the trigger by where you put your finger. So if you grab it way on the bottom and pull with the bottom side of your finger, you have the most leverage. Okay, it makes it easier to pull, but you have a little longer stroke.
Right.
So if you want to shoot a little bit faster, you grab the trigger up a little bit higher.
And you talk about on the tip of your finger.
No, on the finger and the trigger now. So that's the hard part. Find an exact spot that'll let you ride the gun as fast as possible. There again, it's a serrated trigger. So I'll shoot it about like this. Now also, when you hold it in your hand, what's very important is how much you have it, the angle in relationship to your forearm. You notice right here, what I try to do with just about any gun to have it recoil straight back, I'll grab it to where it'll index straight in the hand. Now this gives you pretty much an inline recoil, and if you're holding it correctly, the sight will come down square on the target again. It's very important. Now you get some stocks and some model variations to where your finger, when you hold it directly in line, you can't reach the trigger. So then you tweak it a little bit. Usually you offset a little bit to the right. Yeah, it'll change how much finger you have in the trigger. So you have to find that exact spot.
And how do you do that? Is by getting out and trying, right?
Trying or having somebody instruct you in what you're trying to see. That's one of the hard things about shooting in general. Like I'll come out some days and shoot. I'll burn 500 rounds, 1,000 rounds in a couple of days and didn't see anything. And it might go on for 2 or 3 months at a time. And then you'll have a breakthrough where you actually saw something and you achieved.
That will help your technique.
Right.
Well, it's just like golf or like tennis or anything else. You get these things by experience. Now then, those of us out here who watch you, though, can take advantage of all this extra work that you've done, because you can tell us it. Now, you folks have opened a shooting school out here at Clark's, is that correct?
Right, Johnny.
And what are you going to be teaching, Jerry?
I'll teach revolver, anything from basic marksmanship up to the speed shooting. If you're interested in steel challenge shooting, dipstick shooting, self-defense, gun handling.
So just a whole...
It encompasses just about anything to do with handguns, semi-auto or the revolver.
Now then, how often are you going to hold these classes?
Whenever I have enough interest, I'll get a group of people, 3 or 4. I like to work with a small group. Everybody gets a lot of hands-on experience. You can interact a lot better in a small group.
Well, I think that is great. Certainly, a lot of people are really going to enjoy this. Well, sir, why don't you do a little shooting for us here?
Well, what I'm gonna do right here, I'm just gonna see if I can shoot about 6 rounds in a second on that target. And I'm gonna start off on the rail like I'll shoot a bowling pin and just see if I can come up and shoot it. Hadn't shot this one in a while, so we'll see what it looks like. Should shoot some 38 special.
Jerry, that's pretty darn fast shooting. In fact, we have taken your times with a calculator, and we have discovered that you shoot a revolver just a little bit faster than a grease gun submachine gun.
Well, it's about that rate of fire. It's about 480 rounds a minute usually. So, like on that particular string, we had an 18, a 16, and a 15, and a 17. So it's running.
Now let's explain that. You're talking 1500s between shots.
Right, between shots.
1800s between shots.
Right.
And friends, I tell you what, that is fast. Now the average person is going to have to get out here. And I think we have to say something about Jerry does have some unique talents as far as the speed, obviously, that his fingers and hands work. And when you started off, were you a very fast shooter when you started?
No, I wasn't. Matter of fact, it was just the opposite.
Really?
Just the opposite. It was a terrible experience. I came about the shooting game in the exact wrong way, never having anybody instruct me properly. I went at it the wrong way for so long that I actually learned a few things. And I've told my father-in-law, Jim Clark, the basic story of how I got to shooting and what happened and why I developed this trigger speed. And it really makes him laugh to hear it, But basically, what you're doing when you're shooting a revolver fast like that, or any handgun, to a bullseye shooter, he doesn't want to know anything about when the gun is going to fire. Because the least important thing to a bullseye shooter is the actual gun firing.
Surprise break. That's
Right.
where that term's
He
come from.
wants to have a perfect sight picture, and he wants to have a surprise trigger fall,
Right.
hammer fall.
Right.
To him, to a revolver, to a bullseye shooter is exactly what he's looking for, a total surprise. To an action shooter, I want to know when this thing is going to fire.
Right.
But I'm a counteract it. I'm a counteract the recoil. When this thing fires, if the gun was to snap, I've had people say, you know, if you had a dud or a squib, and a bullet went halfway in the barrel, you'd blow your gun up. You know, you just stack another one right on top. It doesn't work that way. The way I shoot a gun like that, if this thing was to snap while I'm shooting a rapid fire string, the gun would lunge forward. I'm doing a forward poke every time I shoot the weapon.
Really?
To counteract the recoil. Just like the Browning shotguns they make now. The
Right.
new trap guns, that the actual gun recoils forward, then the shot fires. It's the same thing with a handgun. You start to develop this natural instinct to override the recoil. Now, to a bullseye shooter, if he starts to shoot rapid fire, it'll translate over to his bullseye shooting and mess him up.
Well,
So they anticipate
some people, especially what we used to see people try to shoot 4-inch Model 29s years ago, 44 Magnums, they'd try in double action, they'd shoot about 3 or 4 times, they'd start down here, and then the third or fourth shot would be up here. So what you're saying is that you're able, through recoil, to hammer away and
Right.
keep it on target.
Well, see, proper grip technique, knowing what to do with your elbows, your upper body, even how you stand. I mean, it's not just a matter of taking a gun out and shooting it 6 times.
All right, what's a good stance for you when you're shooting like something real fast like that? How do you stand?
Well, the Weaver stance, the Weaver stance that came out in the 70s was the hot ticket, you know.
Right.
You presented the gun to the target, you pushed the gun and you pulled with your left hand. So you push-pull.
Right.
Had nothing to do with shooting. You might saw wood that way. You know, it had nothing to do with actual shooting. It doesn't. It's a good story to tell somebody. If you want to impress them with a lot of words. But in actual technique, if you leave your elbow bent, it acts as a shock absorber.
Really?
Okay, the worst thing you want to do is shoot a gun stiff on.
Now the problem comes in where people have.
Friends, due to time limitations on the show today, we'll have to come back next week and finish this piece with the great Jerry Michalik.
If you would like to advertise on the Shootin' Show, you can call us at 1-800-SAVE-YOUR-GUN. That's 1-800-728-8486. Our staff will be very happy to talk to you.
Well, friends, it's happened again. We've run out of time for today's program. From Kurt, the judge, myself, we want to thank everyone for being with us for today's program, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Shootin' Show.